Right, ladies and gentlemen, I know you were all clapping for me, and I'm really grateful. Of course you are, yes, of course you are. And I've never seen the lunchroom exit so quickly either, so thank you for being so good and so obedient. We have an exciting chat ahead of us, but I just wanted to say a couple of things. First of all, I know that lunch was rushed. However, it's available for the next hour or so, so please, if you get hungry later, do nip downstairs. Now, on my right, Zeinab Badawi. I mentioned earlier today that two people were here in 2015 when we had the first Africa debate, and Zeinab was one of them. So along with Dr. Adeshina, Zeinab was there 10 years ago. So I would like to, a round of applause and welcome to Zeinab Badawi. The other thing I'd like to say is she has written the most fantastic book on Africa, and I think it went to the Times. What did she tell us? It was the top of the Times list.
Yes, number one.
In very short.
Number one.
Number one.
It got to number one within 8 days of publication.
There we go. There we go.
Putting Africa at the top.
And as she said, her main objective is putting Africa at the top of that list. So thank you, Zeinab, for everything you do for Africa. And then sitting to her right is a gentleman I know that none of you recognize. So. It almost seems redundant standing here. Idris Elba, filmmaker, actor, and today really in his role as activist and philanthropist to talk to us about some of his passions in Africa. So hugely warm welcome to you, Idris, for making the time to join us today.
Thank you. Thank you.
And now we have a very short video to play, just a couple of minutes, and then we will kick off with the conversation. So thank you very much, everybody.
We are announcing a partnership between Sherbro Alliance partners and Octopus, the first of its kind wind farm on an island called Sherbro in Sierra Leone.
Today, 7 out of 10 people in Sierra Leone don't even have electricity. Just as happened with mobile phones and the internet. We can leapfrog past the world of fossil fuels and go straight to the best solution, which is renewables.
We will be building a wind farm which will consist of 5 wind turbines. This is really important because currently in West Africa and Africa more generally, there is a real lack of data which to base new models for renewables on. Our wind farm will be collecting data so that we can get the right information into those models and see the tremendous opportunity that is renewables for the African continent.
This island is an ambitious plan that the SAP group, my group, have had. We're working in conjunction with the government, and we're planning to build the first West African smart city.
Sherbro Alliance partners that have already been working to really build a framework for Sierra Leone where they can bring in partners like ours and unlock the island city vision that they have for Sherbro.
To have an incredible company like Octopus bring a wind farm is massively significant. It's not only significant for Sierra Leone, but it's definitely significant for West Africa.
We're starting off with the pilot program on Sherbro Island CTE, but the long-term plan is for Octopus to become a partner on the renewable side of energy as the city develops.
Africa is the sort of place with a lot of corrective opportunity. In other words, if the rest of the world have done it a certain way, we can do it differently.
And it'll enable countries, not only Sierra Leone, but across West Africa, to start benefiting from cheap, clean electricity.
Idris Elba, welcome. It's lovely to be with you. Just seeing everything you're doing there, it's any wonder that you can still do any acting. Do you have any time for that? But of course, we all know and love you from the screen. You know Luther, The Avengers. Of course, you also portrayed Mandela, and your film career needs no description, really. Wonderful to be with you. I've admired you from afar, and it's now good to be this close to you.
It's good to be here. And I'm very, very thankful to be here. Thank you for this amazing forum of people. I was distracted by my moustache on that because when you're acting, you have different facial hairs and haircuts. It's always distracting.
We like this one, we like this one. So backstage, I was having a kind of competition with you, Idris, who could claim most African countries. You've got Sierra Leone on your father's side, Ghana on your mother's, I have Sudan, a bit of Ethiopia and Egypt in me, so I win.
Okay.
There we go.
Okay.
So, but like you, you've lived all your life in the UK. I've lived in the UK since I was 2 years of age. But let's then take a view of Africa. Just give us an overview of Africa in the world today, because there have been some quite exciting things. Last year, the African Union became a member of the G20 nations of leading economies. We also saw Ethiopia and Egypt join the BRICS nations. So, and we see, you know, a lot of friends around the global community, like Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala at the World Trade Organization, Amina Mohammed at the United Nations, Gilbert Ungbo at the International Labour Organization. So many Africans in leading places that, you know, I want to ask you, if we're not at the top table, we'll be on the menu, won't we? So how do you see Africa's place in the world today?
Look, you know, it's when you lay off all those, when you read out all those, you know, fantastic bits of information about Africa, what we're suddenly seeing is inclusion of Africa in the conversation. And although that is to be celebrated, I'm excited about that. But it's a bit late, you know, to be honest, you know. It's like Africa has been a land of opportunity for a long time. It has been a very important continent for our world. And only now are we seeing these, you know, international inclusive moments, which is fine, it's good. But I think what we're witnessing and why we have this room is that there is this real presence that Africa has that is self-motivated almost, Africans for Africans, if you like. Mm-hmm. Not always waiting to be included in the international agenda, where for so long we have not been included. And I'm not poo-pooing that advancement, but I think that that's no longer the focus, that we should be included in everyone else's agenda, because I think Africa has an opportunity to leapfrog, quite frankly, as a world contributor. The opportunities are vast, you know, not to mention the, you know, demographic, the young demographic, you know, the populace of Africa, as everyone knows, is growing. That populace that may take advantage of any investments that come from this room are probably around the ages of 7 to 10 years old now by the time that investment comes into fruition, and that population is growing. And that's something that America can't say, Russia can't say, you know, some of the superpowers cannot talk about a growing demographic like the way Africa can. So it's an interesting opportunity. What I'm fearful of, and I don't mean to start on a negative, but, you know, Africa has been taken advantage of in the worst way for so long. And here we have an opportunity where there is a focus on Africa. And I think what I'm worried that is that we open the doors to inclusion so much that we find ourselves yet again being pulled pillar to post without the focus being on the nurture of Africa itself. And I think that's something that, you know, when people ask me, it's a kind of controversial answer. Of course I want investment. Of course I want people to look at Africa as an opportunity, but I want Africans to see their own opportunity, own the narrative, and be mindful of, you know, the popularity that's, the population that's there, that's growing, rather than looking outwards.
Yeah, an African blueprint for Africa's own, you know, progress.
Yeah.
I mean, I have really noticed a difference after the COVID vaccine debacle of how much Africans were saying, look, you know, we really want to mobilize our own domestic resources and really work out our own future and rely on ourselves. But of course, foreign investment is also important. But the figures, you're right. I mean, Africa is a young population, average age 18 or 19. When you compare it to the UK, 41. Italy 47, Japan 49, and that's where the strength and the vigor of the continent lies.
It is.
So let's look at that strength and that vigor. Obviously, the creative industries, often overlooked, but very, very important. There was a very landmark report that was commissioned by the United Nations Education, Scientific and Cultural Organization, UNESCO, which said, look, you know what, if you really develop the creative industries, in particular the film and audiovisual sector, you could get something as much as $20 billion and generate 20 million jobs. I think currently the figure is between 4 to 5 billion. So huge potential there. So just give us, again, a flavor of the kind of opportunities you see in that sector.
Yeah, it's a really interesting area. You know, for many reasons, the creative arts isn't seen as an investable economic driver of many countries. You know, and there are many reasons for that, because creatively, creatives and tradition and heritage have sort of been mapped into here, and then business and finance and economy is over here. So this does not quite get looked at as an economic driver. However, that's definitely changing, as we know. If you think about America, you know, roughly a population of about 350 million people. I think 2 years ago, the creative sector contributed about $1.1 trillion of the GDP, and that was from a sector of about 4% of the people. Okay, that's 4% that work in the creative industries, putting that sort of money into the GDP. So the figures that UNESCO have put up are great and optimistic, but actually I think underestimated. When you think about, if I take the areas that I'm working with, Tanzania, Ghana, Sierra Leone, Nigeria, that's roughly around the same amount of population of America, okay? I believe that if we find a way to make the creative industries in those 4 countries really populate, I think we can do a lot more than 20 billion, quite frankly. But it does take a lot of things to get to that place. The creative industry is a bit like an army, okay? You know, you've got the guy over there that cooks, and if he doesn't cook, that soldier doesn't fight. And you've got the mechanic over there, and if he doesn't fix that engine, this thing doesn't go out there, okay? The creative industry has so many things. When people think about creatives, they think about singers and dancers and actors, but the entire infrastructure is investable. The entire infrastructure is like an army. One piece needs to work with the other. So from a policy perspective, there is everything from IP protection, law, financial services, insurances that really need, that we need to help the creative industry grow.
So these are some of the obstacles that have to be overcome, some of the challenges.
These are the areas that show you the spectrum of what happens in the creative industry. So yes, this area is underserved massively, but of course you've got the technical side, the infrastructure, the studios, the facilities, the schools, the cameras, the equipment. All of that is a huge investable area, okay? Not to mention the people, how people watch films, see films, perform, where they go, all of that whole area. And you know, the creative industry is like a soft power. Okay, so in Sierra Leone, which has seen a lot of devastation over the years, and when anybody who doesn't know anything about Sierra Leone, the first thing they say is blood diamonds. And do you know why they say that? Mainly because of the film. Simple as that. They might not even know much about what happened in Sierra Leone, but they know about the film. So if Sierra Leone decided to tell that story with a fantastic film, they, as a soft power, could change the face of their own country with one film. They could change the narrative. And that's what's important. So outside of creating jobs, it's a window, it's a shop window. Sure. You know, it's a shop window, a driver for tourism, education, and, you know, really helping reframe how Africa can be
challenges the perceptions. But you've got some obstacles, as I said, on the way. A lot of African countries, including the ones you've mentioned, or at least some of them, you know, lack the proper regulatory frameworks in order to give investors, you know, that level of confidence. Capital is a coward after all. And, you know, you also don't have the, you know, consistency of governments. And also, although as somebody who's traveled across most of Africa, as you have too, we know there is a very digitally savvy young population, but there are still huge tracts of, you know, the population who don't have access to the
data
internet and so on.
Yeah.
So, you know, there are these problems when you want to develop the film and audiovisual sector. So just perhaps enumerate the kind of challenges you are facing.
Yeah, I mean, they're wide-reaching, you know, lots of different challenges. I think from a sort of policy perspective, so South Africa, Morocco, Mauritius have built in you know, tax incentives to stimulate the economy, the film economy. So in South Africa, it has done a fantastic job of international attraction for films that is being done by a, you know, a robust tax incentive. Mauritius have done the same, Morocco too. And for other governments to actually grasp onto that, there's an educative curve that needs to happen, okay? Governments that are struggling with their own economics find it very difficult to suddenly say, well, okay, we'll give you 15, 20% of your, you know, investment back. The concept is odd. Not to mention that there isn't you know, a bubbling, you know, economy coming from local productions already. So in Nigeria, which, you know, has the biggest film industry, I think 5 billion a year currently, and that is mainly local for local, okay? So it's self-serving, a bit like the early Indian film industry. That economy right there, the government is definitely stepping towards finding tax incentives. And I think if it does it correctly, it will definitely encourage international in, okay? But that's one of the big
Yeah, there's a lot
hurdles.
of interest. Yeah, it is a big hurdle. I mean, I've heard that the gaming industry, which is worth something like 200 billion globally, is beginning to say, look, it's not, you know, Japan and the US aren't the be-all and end-all, and a lot of attention being paid to Africa in terms of developing video games and so on, both for the local market and internationally. So tell us a little bit more about, you said you've got these film studios in Tanzania, you've just started one in Tanzania, you've already looked at Ghana, Nigeria, and Sierra Leone, of course. So just tell us a bit about whichever one you fancy.
Well, yeah, no, just to be very clear about when people say, you're building studios, they think that I'm really in there building them.
With your...
I'm building, in stage one, I'm building the sort of investable framework for those studios. And Ghana and Nigeria are the ones that I've been working on the longest, Tanzania much newer, and Sierra Leone attached to the Sherbro. And these infrastructures I'm trying to build is trying to get policy to understand how we get investment into this space, okay? But they say if you build the bridge, people will use it. So the facility, which is essentially a smaller component of this infrastructure, in other words, it's a plot of land, it's a build, and if I build it, people will come. So that's where I'm at currently. So in Ghana and Sierra Leone, we have land. We are in the very early stages of how we build these places. The idea is for me to build business models around them, and those business models are about attracting international players into those studios. So in Ghana, His Excellency has been very keen to build a tax incentive. He hasn't announced it yet, but there is one.
Well, you have now.
Well, no, but he has.
Sorry, Nana Akufo-Addo. Yeah.
We have talked about it extensively, and they are about to announce something quite significant, which would be great. And what that means for my business model when I say to them, I've got a studio, is like, okay, well, how do we put people in it? And I say, I have a tax incentive, and that's the progress here. So Ghana is probably the most advanced, but in actuality, Nigeria is where there's an economy there. I could build a studio, and I'm building a studio there, local for local. The entire industry there is fantastic. They're robust, but they do not have a world-class facility. And for me, the business model is not necessarily pinned onto the tax incentive, but is pinned onto the local economy, okay? Telling better stories, better equipment. Not to mention the Netflix, the Apples, the Amazons of the world, of which I have relationships, onboarding them as anchor tenants. So that's the business model.
You need the public sector and the private to work
100%.
hand in hand, and you need money. You're being a bit behind the door in asking for money.
No.
Hello, any investors out there? Idris this way.
I think what's important about investing in the creative industry is that you have to become educated. My team and I have been having very extensive talks. I don't want to say with who, but a very large financial institution. They have been phenomenal, but it's been a year and a half talking about the deal. And the reason is because there's a long educative curve. Investment, it's like, how quickly do we get our money back? You know, these questions are not necessarily relevant in the creative space. It's a long-term investment, and it's a long-term investment. And like I said, the people that will benefit from these investments are 10 years old, okay? So
that's the pitch.
So that's the way we've got to think about it. And if you're in the long game, then this is where we go. But
you always need to take the long game with Africa. So we saw in that video a taste of what you're doing also in a slightly different arena in Africa. And I know climate change and global warming is something that's very close to you and your wife, Sabrina. You're both ambassadors for IFAD, the International Fund for Agricultural Development. Since 2020, you've been goodwill ambassadors for them. You know, you go and look at farmers and see how they're getting drought-resistant crops and all the rest of it. And we all know now that obviously Africans are those who are most affected by global warming and have contributed least of all. I mean, the figure is quite startling, isn't it? If you look at global warming, carbon emissions, the contribution from Africa is 3%. If you strip away the industrialized north, it's 0.5 percentage point for Africa south of the Sahara. And I am always struck by the dissonance in the debate here in the UK. It's all about mitigation and can we do this, can we do that? And the Africans ask, how can you mitigate 0.5 percentage point? There we go. So you have to look at adaptation so much more, but also there's an opportunity, as you showed, and you mentioned leapfrogging, you know, technology, so Africans hopefully can get rich and not dirty in the way that the industrialized West did. So just tell us, from your perspective, briefly, a kind of, you know, where you see the priorities for climate change in Africa lie.
I mean, look, you know, with my small knowledge, and basically my knowledge is based on what I've been going through in the idea of building a smart city, you know, climate change, the climate crisis is at the forefront. I have an island, and in 20, 30 years, that coastline is going to be further back. Okay, so the priorities are about, again, education and understanding. I think Africa definitely needs to embrace the renewable energy space, and we can do that. Technology currently allows, you know, technology is cheaper, oddly enough, and it allows Africans to adopt it where the West cannot. They're already tied into older systems, and Africa, for a large part, has a sort of greenfield opportunity here. So, you know, for me, the priorities are for us as African nations to look at the green economy very carefully. And that is not to say not to use old energy sources to build that, but I think we should use this to build that, to future-proof, without a doubt. I'm in that camp. Anyone that says to me, Africa shouldn't dig for oil and any of that, to me, is like a hypocrite. But the truth is, you know, we shouldn't be playing the same game as them. We should be playing a game that future-proofs Africa, looking at green economy much more carefully. And the priorities are definitely about, you know, investing in infrastructures that do that, investing in technology, investing in education to understand the curve that's coming. So on my island, our island, you know, Octopus Energy, who have partnered with us to build the first wind farms there, okay? Sherbro is not on an electric grid. Okay, so generative power from generators is how they get their electricity. These 5 wind turbines will offer electricity for the Bomp city, which is the smaller capital city of that island. And with that, it's not for profit, but it's a data collector. And that data is massively important. The reason why people do not invest in Africa in the way that we would like is because the data isn't available. So investing in the data is important. So I build a wind tunnel, I can tell you how it works, how people use it, what are the shortfalls, what are the things we've learned. And I think that actual investment in data, whether it is the creative sector or it is or climate, is incredibly important. And what we mustn't do as Africans is give that data away. It's expensive, it's valuable, and it's the data that's actually going to future-proof Africa.
You raised some very interesting points there. I think, you know, when you say you're not going to be a hypocrite and tell Africa not to use its oil and gas, because of course it needs to, there is a transition, isn't there, that everybody accepts, but that doesn't stop you at the same time pursuing a kind of renewable path. And I mean, the figures are quite surprising because, as you say, the mature economies, such as here in the UK, you know, they've got the old creaking infrastructure and so on, much harder to turn them around. But Kenya, I mean, 92% of electricity in Kenya is generated through renewable sources. And, you know, I was reading about their solar-powered irrigation systems that's led to agricultural yields increasing by about 300%. I mean, you know, it is quite incredible what is going on. And of course, the potential for geothermal energy is huge in Africa. So you're absolutely right to point to that. And you've told us about how you're doing that in Sherbro. So perhaps tell us a bit more about Sherbro, your smart city in Sierra Leone, and just what your vision is for that. And, you know, what's it about?
I think, you know, Sherbro Island is definitely the most ambitious project of my life. I've done some crazy things in my life, but the idea of building a smart city is definitely up there. But it's the most excitable thing for me. Over the last 6 years, I've been working with GOSL, Sierra Leone government, to figure out what is the investable opportunity here. Not just investable, but how do we develop this beautiful landmass for Sierra Leone? And how do we use that to change the narrative? And where we worked for 6 years is to figure out what the investment framework agreement looks like. How is it managed? How is it different from how the government historically has run? What are we doing different? And we have this incredible opportunity that has just been passed in cabinet in Sierra Leone after 6 years, and I'm very excited. You can clap, please clap, because I have a document. Now we're heading towards ratification, but the truth of the matter is that we've spent a lot of time understanding how to make an investable, you know, smart city, okay? It's multi-sector, so of course there's tourism, it's a beautiful part of the world, business, agriculture, of course, and development, real estate. The landmass of Sherbro is around the size of Chicago, and you know, we imagine that within the next 10 years we will build a population of somewhere between 250,000 and 50,000 people.
It's about 30,000 now, isn't it?
Right now, yeah. And just to be very clear, you know, all of this has been done with complete in conjunction with the people on Sherbro, the mayor, the chiefs. It's a chieftain society, and the chiefs of each district, and the people. And they feed into us what they would like to see happen here. Long story short is that my group, Akuna, which sort of has all these different sectors, and I'm focusing on Africa. Akuna is the sort of engine that is behind Sherbro Alliance. We have partnered with engineering firms from across the world to help us with the master plan and what it may look like and how that. We are in the stage of feasibilities currently, feasibility studies, which we think will be, you know, for the next 2 years before we actually break ground on it. The low-hanging fruit is to turn what's there now into a very sustainable, livable environment. There are opportunities in irrigation and fishing and agriculture that happen now. Like I said, I've got Octopus Energy as a energy partner now. And so the opportunities there are very important.
I mean, to have I mean, it's something like 28% of Sierra Leoneans have access to electricity, isn't it? I mean, it's the case across so much Africa, 600 million people without it. So we wish you luck with that. I mean, it's a beautiful part of the world, as you say. So, you know, clearly you're a huge advocate and practitioner for sustainable strategic investment in Africa. So just perhaps give us some other areas that you think would benefit from greater attention and greater investment, both locally and foreign direct investment.
You know, one of the big areas that all of this needs is connectivity, okay? Africa has the least amount of data centers relatively to the rest of the world and considering its landmass. That connectivity is incredibly important for its growth. And from my feedback, the interfacing between Africa and the rest of the world needs work, okay? It needs digitization, it needs trusted systems. So if I'm going to encourage a data center company to come to Sherbro, they need to understand that there's a pathway that they can go in which is familiar to them, but gets the results. So I've been working, ServiceNow is an American company. They're essentially a logistics company, and ServiceNow have been really keen to help me and the government of Sierra Leone digitize the system, a system which will allow for investment groups and companies to have a familiar entry point. That interface is massively important. And essentially, Akuna, my group, I consider myself that interface. One of the benefits of being an actor is that people will take a meeting, there's no doubt. And I take advantage of that.
Depends on the actor, I suppose, but certainly you. Certainly you.
They will take the meeting for the picture, even if they don't invest. However, what I'm keen of doing, and some of my team here, can I please, everyone from my team, can you stand up? Khalid and Afua and Katra. Everyone on my team are leading. When we go into meetings to talk about it, I think people take the picture and say, oh my God, what's going on over there? But what I'm trying to do is build a very relatable, consistent interfacing model that allows investors to go, okay, Idris, if I come with you, how do we do this? And I say this out of the experience of working with one of the, you know, I wouldn't say difficult, this Sierra Leone has been a very interesting, stretched government to work with. There's lots been happening during the time I've been working with them. But Madabio has been very keen for progress. And in that time, I've learned so much, so much. So I think I'm positioned as an interface model quite well currently. So what's next for me? I think developing that interfacing model, the creative sector is certainly my wheelhouse, but I think this creative sector opens many doors in many different investment areas, infrastructure, education, tech, and agriculture, because people got to eat, okay? But that sort of umbrella and that menu for me is what I'm sort of servicing now. On top of that, you know, as an actor, I'm very fortunate. I still have a career and I'm still doing it, but I'm pivoting my productions over the next 2 years to work in my studios in Africa. And that will be, you know, really a game changer for me, but also I think for the creative landscape.
Idris Elba, a man of many parts, and you may know that Sierra Leone in Portuguese, which is the Portuguese coin the name, is the Lioness Mountain. Certainly the lion of Sierra Leone has indeed roared. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Idris.
Thank you very much.